Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
One Piece Straw Hat Family by Hotspot the 626th. As the crew travels through the Grand Line, something happens that not even the crew could prepare for. A baby? What are the Straw Hats going to do? Abbas, I don't own anything. Adios.
Honeymoon Chaos. The return of Foxy, the Silver Fox. Ready, said Usopp eagerly. Set. Luffy said determinedly while fastening his flotation wear on his fit body. Then, standing before them also including Chopper, Mika waved her hand down before excitedly shouting, "Go!" Instantly, the three immature adults rushed past the girl. Mika, along with Akio standing on the sidelines holding two small boards, moved quickly to watch the adults both looking amazed. None of them noticed another little girl, about Akio's age, in a yellow, pink frilled shirt watching them with her odd-looking raccoon creature with aquatic features on her shoulder. To anyone else, it looked like a simple footrace in the waiting pool area, but just a couple of feet in front of the men and reindeer were 3 bars of soap awaiting their participant. Having run enough, by the way, don't do this at home, kids, the 3 pirates made a wide leap to the soap and fortunately they all landed safely on top of each. From the momentum of their leap, the immature trio were then propelled forward riding and balancing on top their soaps. Each one trying their best to not only keep up their balance but also to outspeed the other towards some imaginary goal line. Little did they suspect, only seconds after they had started, that 2 kids would come skidding past them on waterboards. Surprised to see the kids pass them so suddenly, all 3 participants lost their balance and fell into the shallow water. Having watched, Mika openly laughed at how funny her father and relatives were remaining on her waterboard perfectly. Akio simply smirked, overconfident and proud, whilst riding his board well enough. As both were distracted, neither one noticed that the wading pool was beginning to deepen, and with the connection between board and floor suddenly gone, both kids fell forward into deeper water. Though only about 4 feet of it, it was deep enough for the kids to be completely submerged in water only to swim back up. Mika having a harder time of doing so than Akio. Luckily, they both came back up to the surface, but again Mika having a harder time keeping afloat. Thankfully, Akio helped the girl get to swallow her water. "Are you okay?" asked Akio full of concern. Mika, despite having nearly drowned, replied back with a smile and excited nod. "Yeah, let's do that again." However, despite her cheerfulness, Akio still remained concerned. "Do you know how to swim?" Akio asked out of the blue. The young girl thought for a moment. "Nope," she said plainly before smiling proudly, still missing a tooth. "But neither can Daddy, Auntie, Uncle Chopper, or Uncle Brooke." Instantly, Akio looked at her with furious disbelief. "Don't use those guys as an example," he said, knowing that each one listed had eaten a devil fruit. Before Mika could say something else, probably in her defense, someone else's laugh caught her and Akio's attention. "Whoa, that was so cool." The kids looked over to the side to see the girl, from earlier, standing near them looking at them amazed. With her was also the raccoon-like animal, which instantly grabbed their attention. "Whoa," Mika said astonished before trudging over to get a closer look at the animal. Hanging on the edge of the pool, she then asked, "What is that?" "This is Nucky," the girl explained happily, "he's a sea raccoon." "Cool," Mika said amazed. "A sea raccoon?" Akio questioned with surprise. "I didn't think those were real." Then, Akio suddenly recalled something. "Wait, can it really transform?" he asked. Yeah." The girl then looked over at her partner. "Show them, Nucky." The little creature Nucky grinned and chirped a noise that sounded like his name happily. Then instantly, the little raccoon fish was covered in pink smoke. Once it disappeared, no longer was there a sea raccoon but a penguin. After only a few seconds, the smoke reappeared again and replaced the penguin with a bird, fully capable of flight. Both kids were amazed by display. "Whoa," the young girl giggled happily. "My name is Rina, nice to meet you." "Hi, I'm Mika," the youngest said cheerfully. "Akio," the boy said acting cool. "Can I ask you something?" Rina asked suddenly. "Did I hear you right earlier? Are you really pirates?" "Yeah," Mika said unashamed. "We have some special circumstances," Akio added, slightly nervous. "Wow, that's cool," Rina replied impressed. "I didn't know kids could be pirates. I always thought there were only bad pirates that sailed the seas." Mika shook her head. "Nope, sometimes," Akio quickly interjected before allowing Mika to continue. "My daddy is the nicest, coolest, greatest, bestest pirate ever." She, ah, shucks. Suddenly, Mika was engulfed by 2 thin arms that pulled her into a hug. She wasn't worried of course for she knew it was her father, but it was a surprise that he appeared behind her. And now with his daughter in his hold, Luffy commented with a modest smile, "That's nice of you to say, little monkey, but I'm like nothing compared to a few other pirates." Instantly, Mika giggled. "No way, they're all lame." My daddy is gonna be king of the pirates. Give it up, Luffy. Usopp, having followed Luffy, said smugly grinning as he sat on the edge of the pool along with Chopper. You can't lie to your own daughter. Luffy was unable to come up with a comeback, so he just chuckled bashfully. Rina watched on with a surprised expression on her face. This quickly faded and was replaced with a heartwarming and yet slightly sad smile. She felt a little jealous for some reason, of a girl near her age looking up to her father, but she tried not to let the group notice this, and luckily, they didn't. Oh, Daddy, everyone, Mika said loudly to gain the adults' attention. This is Rina, she has a sea raccoon named Nucky that can transform. As if on cue, the bird sitting on Rina's shoulder was covered in smoke and replaced with its true form, amazing the newcomers. While Nucky now held onto Rina's shoulder, the young girl greeted the pirates pleasantly. You guys look silly, but it's nice to meet you. Rina then noticed Chopper and gasped in surprise. Whoa, you have a raccoon dog? He's a reindeer, both Chopper and Mika said, interjecting, the former in frustration while the latter was more cheerful. Chopper then added, don't you know what a raccoon looks like since you have one? Whoa, he talks. Disregarding his earlier comment, Rina was simply amazed by his sudden show of human speech. That's so cool. Of course, this instantly got Chopper embarrassed. He began goofily smiling while his body became like jelly and wiggled about as he happily told her, just because you called me cool doesn't mean I like you, you jerk. Rina laughed seeing this display. Not only could this supposed reindeer talk, but he got embarrassed and said weird things too. This group of pirates was really interesting. Then, a low thunder grabbed the attention of the group. They all quickly looked up wondering if maybe there was a storm oncoming, and while they did see a storm cloud, it was oddly only one, fairly big cloud. As another low thunder rang out, something dropped out of the cloud. A small, pastel green-colored sphere. Immediately, Usopp caught the thing before it could reach the ground and held it up looking at it closely. What's this? Hail! Interested as well, Akio noticed another ball falling from the cloud. Quickly, he attempted to catch, but it coincidentally landed in his open mouth. And upon landing inside it, Akio made a remarkable discovery. It's candy. Everyone gasped. Immediately, everyone began trying to catch the falling candy, now nearly pouring like rain, with their mouths. Taking advantage of her father's height, Mika climbed on top of him and sat on his shoulders. Of course, Luffy didn't mind and continued to catch candy. It was certainly a sight as people quickly noticed the phenomenon, with a few attempting to catch their own candy goodies. Those among the people watching on were Nami and Robin, the former looking confused at the odd weather. Can it is natural occurrence in this part of the Grand Line? Robin said, informing her friend. As we get closer to the New World, we may see even odder marvels like this. Great. Nami said, sounding less than thrilled over the prospect of even weirder things to happen. Probably not many of them being good either. At least this was harmless, more or less. As Nami and Robin watched the scene, a man along with a parade of meals approached them from behind. The man himself was very non-threatening, dressed in a suit without a jacket and a pencil-thin, curly mustache. He wore a gentle and professional smile as he soon addressed the two pirate ladies. Madams, your order is ready. Hearing him, Nami looked back. Thanks, just set it all by the table, she said, pointing to the one next to them. Immediately, the dirty blonde man waved for his group to set the table. While he led his men to this, he again spoke to the ladies. I hope that everything is to your liking, he said, smiling. Well, it's a good snack for my husband, Nami replied amusedly. Despite thinking how odd her wording sounded, the man kept his professional smile. Of course, should you need any more cuisine, please feel free to visit our buffets located within Spa Island. Yeah, we'll keep that in mind, Nami replied, knowing full well that Luffy would likely visit and clean the joint of all their food. Good thing there's a lot of entertainment. And as always, the man said, giving a polite bow towards his patrons, if you need anything, do not hesitate to ask anyone, including the owner, Doran. Both women nodded, saying nothing more, as Doran and his staff took their leave, leaving the carts of food behind. Nami got up from her chair and walked out towards the pools. She was heading over to where most of her crew and family were currently, still catching candy. None of them had noticed the arrival of their food. Once she was close enough, while not entering the pool itself, she called out to them. Luffy. Guys, food's here, instantly. The guys heard Nami. Awesome, shouted Luffy excitedly before taking off with Mika on his shoulders. Usopp and Chopper were just as excited and followed after him for the food. However, Mika didn't seem that interested. Daddy, she said, looking down. I don't want to eat, can I play some more? Luffy immediately stopped. Oh, he said, surprised but calm. He picked her off his shoulders and placed her down. Have fun. Mika grinned back and then headed right back where she had been previously. Akio, who also had not been hungry, and Rina seemed to have been waiting for her, and Mika was happy they did so. Let's play some more, she told them excitedly. From where she stood, Nami watched everything happen with cat-like curiosity. As soon as her husband was close by, she immediately asked him, is Mika not hungry? Smiling, Luffy nodded. Yeah, she wants to continue playing with her new friend. Oh, if that's all, Nami said, feeling a bit anxious. Yeah, she'll be fine, Luffy stated confidently, sensing the anxiety within Nami. Feeling a bit reassured, Nami smiled back softly. She reasoned that she was just being overprotective. This resort was a huge place, but nothing bad was likely to happen here. Not with all the security it had. Now feeling calmer, she joined Luffy and they headed to their table where much of their group had gathered except Zoro, Sanji, Frankie, and Brook. Nami was sure that Mika and Akio would be fine on their own for a while. Yahoo, Mika, Akio, and Rina continued with their fun after Luffy and the others left. With so many different water attractions, the kids would no problem finding something to do. Currently, the three of them were sliding down one of the many water slides within the resort. Though Mika and Akio were in swimsuits, Rina had no problem getting her clothes wet. It also helped that Nucky could transform into a large enough aquatic creature, a mini Yagura bull to be precise, that allowed her to keep mostly dry. Of course, she shared this experience with her new friends as well. Mika especially enjoyed riding Nucky, as she didn't have to worry about swimming in the few pools that were deep at the bottom of some of the slides. Then, there were the slides that had inner tubes, single, doubles, and even groups of 4. Being able to share the same ride was especially joyous for them. In time, the group finally took a break, having nearly gone to each attraction. As they sat down underneath a shady tree, they began talking amongst themselves. Akio being especially curious. So what brings you here? Well, my big sister and I are kinda on a journey, replied Rina, petting a sleeping Nucky on her lap. Instantly, Mika became excited. You're on an adventure? Here? Yeah, Rina nodded. We're looking for something that we think our dad left behind. Then, Rina began looking around. It only took her a few seconds, but she soon spotted who she was looking for. There she is right now, Rina said, pointing just ahead of them. Mika and Akio spied forward until they spotted who exactly Rina was pointing to. Next to one of the machines used for a pool, an older girl with the same light brown hair, only longer, was kneeling down before an open panel in the floor. While one of her hands fiddled with something within the panel, her other hand held up a small booklet that she seemed to be reading off of. Whatever she was doing, she looked like she knew what to do. Sayo, stopping immediately, the older girl looked up, having heard her name. She instantly saw her sister, with Nucky on drowsily on her shoulder, rushing over towards cheerfully with 2 other kids following behind her. Seeing this, Sayo smiled happily. Who are your new friends, Rina? This is Mika and Akio, Rina said, pointing to each one. They're pirates, but not the bad kind. Sayo blinked with surprise before checking over the other kids. Really? Hi, Mika greeted back with grin. I hope that won't be a bother, Akio said, grinning bashfully. No, Sayo said, shaking her head. She then smiled again. It's just a little surprising. It's nice to meet you, Mika and Akio. Are you looking for treasure? Mika asked suddenly, looking curiously at the open panel. Surprised at first, Sayo immediately looked to her sister, who was smiling and looking unashamed. Kinda, she told the girl. Kinda, repeated Akio, confused. What I'm actually looking for is an X. Oh, like on a treasure map, Mika said, excited. So there is treasure here? Not exactly, Sayo explained. You see, our father was an inventor who managed to create a process for making a gem. Whoa, said Mika and Akio, amazed. Sayo nodded. So, while we are looking for a marking, we are actually looking for the last step in completing it. Then, Rina suddenly had a mood change, becoming mad and frustrated. If it even works, she stated disbelievingly. Rina, Sayo said, upset. Huh? Why would it not work? Asked Akio. Because our dad is a liar, Rina stated unsympathetically. He can't invent anything, just make up stuff and lie that it's real. Our father is a brilliant scientist, Sayo clarified, trying to defend their father, but sometimes his methods are a little strange. He's a lying jerk, Rina added, disgruntled, to the displeasure of her older sister. But there is something here to find, right? Mika asked curiously. Despite her own sister's misgivings, Sayo remained confident. Yes, I know there is something here. Then let's find it, Mika said, grinning with excitement. Then we'll know if your dad was wrong or not. Sayo smiled happily, appreciating a bit of faith despite it being from a stranger. Rina looked less than happy about it, but not apprehensive to the idea. Even in doubt, there was still a little hope within the girl. And of course, Akio was going to tag along anyway. His own emotional investment was rather disdain, as he disliked his own father as well, but he would at least make sure that Mika didn't do anything too dangerous and see if this gem was real. Thus, all the kids, and Nucky, will find what lied them on Spa Island. Phew, unfortunately, they were not the only ones. Once after hearing the distinctive laughter, the kids looked over to find 3 sinister-looking adults stand before them. In the middle was a stout man with a fox-like appearance wearing a swimsuit overalls, grinning triumphantly. To his right was a lovely, young woman with dark blue-green hair in a pink bikini set with a red and white striped stocking cap and a thin, black mask on her face. Also, wrapped around her arms were pink poms. To the man's left was an even larger, gorilla-looking fellow wearing a bathing suit and also wearing a thin, black mask like the woman. He also wore his own stocking cap that was black and blue striped. All three stood together looking towards them, specifically Seo, with something evil in mind. They are Foxy, Porch, and Hamburg of the Foxy Pirates. Recognizing the group, Seo immediately gasped in fear. Oh no. Not them again, Rina said, also recognizing the group of ne'er-do-wells. Phew fei, laughed the stout man before speaking with a somewhat French accent. So, we finally caught up to you brats. You gave us a good run, but now it's all over. Confused, Mika turned to Rina. Who is that weirdo? She asked pointing to split-haired man. Weirdo? Instantly, the insulting description damaged Foxy's ego like a spear. This then instantly brought him into a depressive state that seemed to almost literally make a depression into the floor itself as he felt low. She called me a weirdo. Boss, immediately, Porch came over to her leader's aid. Akio stared at the man surprised. Wow, what low self-esteem. Porch then began trying to soothe and boast the man while the other man just snickered to himself. Don't think much about what she said, boss. She's just a brat, she just doesn't know any better. She doesn't know you, Hamburg said before snickering. Luckily, the woman's encouragement worked. Ah, you're right, the short man said as he returned to his more confident state of mind. That was quick, Akio said even more surprised than previously. Listen up, you brats, declared Foxy as he pointed his finger at the group. The name's Foxy, the Silver Fox. I am a notorious and infamous pirate who sails through the treacherous Grand Line, and I. When Foxy finally took notice of the kids, he found that they had all vanished from the spot. What the hell? Where'd those brats go? He shouted in shock and anger. Boss, Porch shouted quickly. She then pointed out the kids fleeing heading towards the building. They're getting away. Not for long, Foxy stated angrily. He swiftly held up his hand, forming a gesture that had his middle fingers touching his thumb and the other two held up. With this gesture formed, he then aimed it at the group of kids. We need to get out of here, Seo said fearful. Who are those guys? Akio asked. Rina replied, they're a bunch of pirates that want the gem too. Slow beam. Hearing Foxy's shout, the group looked back while running to see what the man had done. Witnessing the oncoming beam of pink light, the group gasped with shock. Unfortunately, doing so had distracted Mika and she slipped on a wet part of the floor. She luckily didn't land too hard onto the floor, but it still hurt. Without a moment to lose, Mika quickly picked herself up. Wait for me, guys, Mika said suddenly confused. Mika had expected for her friends to be ahead of her, but instead they were only a few inches away, and moving very slowly for some reason. They were even screaming slowly. Huh? What are you guys doing? She asked still confused. Phew fei, it's no use, Mika turned around as she heard the man's voice. Foxy and his compatriots were walking over with the small man smirking arrogantly. They have been caught by my slow beam, and they won't be able to move normal for 30 seconds. That's, Mika said as she looked at her friends surprised. Seeing how they were moving so slowly, she then looked back at the group of pirates amazed. So cool. The sudden praise made Foxy stop in shock. Really? He asked hopeful. Yeah, Mika said happily grinning. Foxy looked stunned at the girl. I can't believe it, he then fell to his knees in rapture, after a lifetime of mockery and scorn. A child, a total stranger, had complimented me. Boss, Porch said happy, tearing up. Soon, Foxy began shedding his own tears in joy. I know that I have my crew to always support me, but to hear a child say that I'm cool, the man paused a moment as his emotions nearly made his voice crack. I don't think I've ever had such a moment in my life. Thank you. I'm so happy for you, boss, Porch stated joyfully. Good work, boss, Hamburg said, for once not snickering at all. Porch, Hamburg, Foxy said as he looked up at his most trusted members of his crew. His tears fell more freely now as he then hugged his crewmates. You guys are the best, he cried out. Becoming emotional as well, Porch hugged her captain back. Boss, Hamburg said, hugging the both of them. The three crewmates hugged it out for only a few seconds more, relishing the joy shared by their captain. Though this was a momentous occasion for them, they did remember that they had a task to do. Okay, enough of the sentimental stuff, Foxy said before ending their moment to address the kids. It was nice of you to say that, girl, but that won't stop us from. Foxy had expected to see the kids, -1, still slowly trying to flee, but found they all were gone. What the hell? He shouted with shock. Immediately, Hamburg started snickering again. They escaped, he said before snickering. Down there, boss, Porch shouted and pointed. Not too far was all the kids running, no longer in slow motion. Curses, Foxy said angrily. Hurry, after those brats. The Foxy Pirates 3 immediately took off after the kids, determined as ever to catch them and achieve the goal of making a gem and becoming rich. Though what none of them may have known but their shouting had attracted someone's attention. Nearby had been the waterfall bath, a place of spiritual strengthening for men who consider themselves warriors. Zoro had finished off his concentration training. While at first he had wanted to go find the others, but he had heard a commotion on the other side of the bath. When he walked over, he found that there was no one of any particular interest to be spotted. So, he simply shrugged off what he heard. Damn, noisy tourist. He then walked off to find the others, heading in the opposite direction of them. Good going, Mika, Akio told the girl proudly as they ran, telling that weird guy that his power was cool to distract him and his lackeys was great. Despite the praise, the young pirate girl looked at the pirate boy confused. But I thought it was cool, she said frowning. Seriously, Akio replied with disbelief. Then the group heard a shout, get back here, you brats. They all looked back to see that Foxy and his cohorts were already on their tail, and they were gaining fast. What do we do now? Asked Rina fearful. Akio quickly had an idea. Let's find the rest of our crew. He stated, they'll be able to handle these weirdos. Alright, Seo said quickly agreeing. Where to? They're over, slow being interrupted. The group stopped as they heard the familiar call of one of Foxy's attacks. They stopped and turned to see the pink rays heading towards them. They would need to act fast and soon. Quick! Seo shouted suddenly. She then pushed all the kids and Nucky into the water of the lazy river before jumping in herself. The beams, having missed their marks, flew onwards until hitting several people that had been unfortunate enough to be in the way. Patrons walking by slowly, staff taking orders and requests at a snail's pace, and even the water was only moving like molasses despite the rest of the river flowing at normal speed. And thanks to Seo's quick thinking, OIDED being caught in it again, all of them soon reappeared within the water with Mika having a hard time keeping afloat. Here, luckily, there had been an unmanned inner tube nearby. Rina quickly grabbed it and offered it to Mika, who quickly lashed onto it. Thanks, Mika said relieved. Get back here. The kids heard and looked back seeing Foxy shouting at them. They watched as the group stopped alongside the river and then hear Foxy give out orders. Hamburg, jump in and catch them. Right. The gorilla-like man before snickering and jumping into the river. Being rather large, he created waves in the river as well as take up nearly all the space. Porch, you get on the other side and then we'll trap them. On it, boss. Porch said determinedly. Using Hamburg as a step, she hopped on over to the other side of the river and immediately took after the kids with her crewmates. Oh, Mika said worried. Everyone, Akio shouted as he grabbed onto the inner tube, start kicking. Without a moment's hesitation, the others soon did as Akio ordered. While Mika and Nucky climbed onto the inner tube, the rest of their group started kicking. Immediately, and with the help of the current, the kids were propelled down the river fast. Don't lose them, Foxy shouted before he and his group picked up their speed. Meanwhile, further down the river, one of the Straw Hats was in the lazy river as well. The Straw Hat Pirate's chef, Sanji, was also currently floating on the river. Not to relax, but to hit on or ogle the many beautiful women that liked to hang around or in the river. Much like the food buffet inside the resort, the women here were numerous in their beauty and array of subtle differences that Sanji found all attractive. Soon, he saw two ladies, both unattended by any man, and took his chance. Of course, his charm and chivalry were an immediate turn-on to the two sweet, innocent ladies who hardly knew better. It would look like Sanji would finally achieve his goal in swooning two true loves in one day. While Sanji spoke with the ladies, he caught in the corner of his eye a group of children speeding by him and his new lady friends. He couldn't see them clearly, but he could hear one of them shout out something. Hurry, they're gaining on us. Sanji quickly recognized the voice. Mika, concerned, he immediately drew his attention away from the ladies, a potential first for him. He tried to quickly spy his niece in name only but found that the group he had caught sight of was already gone, having turned the bend already. Come back here. Hearing the new voice, Sanji took a look back to catch sight of a large, gorilla-like man swimming past him as well as a stout man with a split-fashioned hair run by him on land. He also spied the blue-green-haired woman on the other side. Of course, he recognized this group almost immediately. Porch, he said astonished, and those other two weirdos? None of Foxy Pirate Group heard or even noticed Sanji. They only continued to chase the group of kids. This concerned Sanji greatly. Why are they chasing after Mika? He asked to no one but himself. Then, he had a thought. Did they somehow learn that Mika is Luffy's daughter? Mr. Sanji? Spoke one of the girls confused. My apologies, ladies, Sanji said immediately apologizing, behaving like a gentleman. I need to take care of something. This way, Akio shouted as he led the way inside. Eventually, the kids had left Lazy River. And of course, Foxy and his group were still following after them. With there being many points of exit in a lazy river, they had exited out of one closest to the main building of the resort. Such a large building, which connected to the whole and larger facility, would be the perfect place to escape from their pursuers. Quickly, the kids rushed past the many other patrons and entered within the establishment. They entered into a large room where many covered tables were set up, both for the buffet and for people to sit around. The many tables were absolutely perfect to hide in until their pursuers moved on. Unfortunately, there was just one problem. Come on, if we hide under. Akio paused a moment as he noticed that they were missing someone in their group. Where'd Mika go?
She's over by the buffet, Sayo said, pointing. Akio looked over yonder to see that it was true. He could see Mika already trying to get food despite the situation. Mika, he called out and rushed over next to the girl. We don't have time to eat.
Ah, whined Mika, but I'm hungry now. Before Akio could retort, he heard a familiar voice. Hurry. I saw them go in here. Foxy's voice rang out, easily discernible from anyone else's. Crap, Akio said, realizing their time was up. He then pulled up the white table cover and hurriedly gestured towards his group, get under. Sayo and Rina didn't argue, they quickly ducked under the table. Akio then grabbed Mika, who had yet to put any food on her plate. Come on, the boy said before pulling her under the table. Soon enough, Foxy and his partners in crime entered the buffet room. They must be in here, Foxy said confidently. They couldn't have gotten far. They all then began scanning the room looking for their targets. With so many people in this room, it could prove difficult to spy 4 children. They began moving around trying to spy the kids from a different angle. Unfortunately, they weren't having much luck. As they continued on searching, a certain little girl had become hungry enough to risk exposing her and her group. Cautiously, Mika peeked up from the other side of the buffet table. Then, as quick as a flash, she snatched a piece of meat just before Foxy looked back at the table for a quick moment. Though the man hadn't seen a thing, he felt an odd sense that something was going on behind him. He chose not to listen to this instinct and continue scanning the crowd. Thusly, since she hadn't been caught, Mika did the same trick again, this time grabbing an apple. Again, Foxy's instinct had told him to look back at the buffet table. At first, he only saw normal people going by with food, but waiting an extra few seconds longer he spotted Mika coming up for food, her third time. There she is, Foxy shouted to gain his crewmates' attention before pointing the girl out for them to notice. Oh, Mika said before quickly grabbing a cupcake and ducking down. Get her, shouted Foxy quickly. Foxy and his friends swiftly rushed at the buffet table. Of course, since Mika had also seen Foxy and company, she quickly warned the others under the table. The kids then immediately rushed out from under the table towards the dining tables. In seeing them, Foxy's group decided to move accordingly. Foxy was able to make a grand leap over the long table, Porch hopped onto the table and then hop off again lightly. And Hamburg simply smashed the food on the table, causing a mess, but otherwise fine. They all continued to chase the group of kids. The kids began weaving through the tables and people trying their best to lose their chasers. Unfortunately, Foxy and his group were hardly considerate of who or what was in their way. They, Foxy and Hamburg, began disrupting people and flipping tables as they pursued the kids. Foxy even using his slow beam attack attempting to catch them, only to hit others instead. Seeing all this, the people were becoming concerned and afraid. Many began proceeding out of the room quickly, hoping to escape the rampage. They unwittingly provided a perfect cover for the kids to make their own escape. Once out of the room, Rina asked to the boy, "What should we do now?" "We need to get back outside," Akio stated. "We'll definitely find Captain Luffy out on the deck." "Where's outside from here?" Mika asked. "I know the way," Sayo stated, "if we go." "There you are," interrupting the oldest girl, Foxy shouted as he spotted the group having peered out the dining room. Then, he and his crewmates rushed out of the room, coming right for the group. The kids let out a quick scream, "Ah!" before immediate. Now, the chase had been officially moved to inside Spa Island. The facility was almost like a maze, only with many different rooms lying at dead ends. Crisscrossing hallways, a number of stairs and elevators, and many different kind of rooms. It was all perfect for the kids trying to escape Foxy and his team. But let it never be said that Foxy wasn't persistent. He and his group were not going to lose sight of them. The kids were definitely trying though, entering all kinds of rooms like saunas, baths, and ballrooms, always attempting to lose their pursuers, and accidentally cause a commotion while doing so. Now, with all this noise going on, it was no wonder that when Frankie and Brooke came out from their personal spa baths, a cola and milk bath respectively, they were curious as to what was going on. "What do you think is going on?" Frankie asked, concerned. "I have no idea," Brooke replied as he watched on down the hall. He, as well as Frankie, could see a number of people moving around looking worried and confused. Brooke then instead had a different question for his friend. "By the way," he asked, "what exactly is a cola bath?" "Huh?" Frankie said, surprised before asking. "Well, it's kinda like how." "Oh look," Brooke said suddenly, interrupting Frankie's explanation. "Huh?" Frankie said again. While it was only for a quick second, but the both of them were able to spot a group of kids running by a couple feet away. They both had quickly picked out Mika and Akio from within the group, and that they looked like they were in trouble. Before either of them could call out to them, the kids were already gone down another hallway. This concerned the two men. "What's up with the kids?" asked Frankie. Brooke replied sympathetically, "Your guess is as good as mine. You're not gonna get away from us that easily, brats." Hearing the shout, the two Straw Hats continued watching the intersections. It wasn't long when two strange fellows and one girl were in their sights before disappearing down the other hall. The same one that Mika and Akio went down. Instantly, both men became mad. "What's going on?" Frankie asked rhetorically, frowning with irritation. "What are those buffoons doing?" In a darkened room with the only light coming from several monitors, Doran looked at the images on the screen with great disappointment. He had been watching the chase the whole time, and it greatly angered him that these three buffoons, as he called them, were messing up his facility. Of course, his anger was also directed at the children too, for provoking the pirate group into this silly and convoluted chase. It was even starting to appear to be driving his valued customers away.
"All this trouble for some gem," Doran commented madly as he glared at one of the screens, which showed the kids in Foxy's group running by that video transponder snail. His anger quickly subsided, his frown turning to a greedy grin, as he recalled why this gem hunt was so important.
But then again, with the ability to create a near infinite amount of this gem, I can easily make up for any losses I received today. Doran then scanned the screens again, looking for his accomplices, Foxy and his two crewmates, only to find them stopped and alone with nary a kid in hand or sight. This instantly brought back the man's contempt for the group. How can they lose track of a couple of brats? Again, Doran scanned through the screens, this time looking for those four children that his partners were after. After a moment or two, he finally spotted them on the farthest screen. "So, they're on floor 12. He spoke to no one, grinning triumphantly. Immediately, the owner of Spa Island picked up a dial on a transponder snail. It was a personalized one wearing the same kind of mask that Foxy's crewmates were wearing, including the stocking cap. He waited as the snail made a noise in waiting for someone before finally clicking. Foxy's voice then came out of the snail. "Yes. Hello, partner. What is it that you need?" "I saw that you lost track of the gem girl." Doran spoke with a cunning grin. "I know where they are." It had taken them a while, but the kids had finally given Foxy and his crewmates the slip. AMD, with all the running they had been doing, they hardly knew where they had ended up inside this huge resort. At a glance, it appeared that they had ended up at a two-way intersection hallway. The wall across from them was two signs pointing opposite each other down the hallways. On the left read, "Dream Blissfully Spa," and the other to the right read, "Date with Destiny, Restaurant." Of course, none of the kids really cared, as they were all catching their breaths from all the running they did. After a while, with their energies restored, the kids were ready to go. "Hold on," Akio said, stopping everyone from moving onward. "We need a plan." "A plan?" repeated Mika, confused. "Why, we already lost those guys." "But they probably haven't given up yet," Akio stated almost surely. "I think we should split up." "What good will that do?" asked Rina this time. "As a group, we'll be easy to spot, but as two teams we can confuse them, and at least one of us can reach the top and get our crew." "I think that's a good idea," Seo said, agreeing. Akio nodded. "Good, then, I call Rina and Nuki," Mika said quickly, interrupting Akio. She then immediately stood next to said girl and Peg, grinning triumphantly. Rina giggled and happily agreed to partner with Mika. Sure, her companion, Nuki, then called out happily in agreement as well. The Straw Hat cabin boy sighed with mild annoyance. "Fine," he said, "I can go with Seo." "Thank you," she said with an appreciative smile. "All right," Mika shouted, excited, pumping her fist in the air. "Now let's." The young girl was about to move forward until she realized something. She looked back to the group, grinning nervously and embarrassed. Which way should we go?" Instantly, Akio placed his hand into face with disbelief. "Just pick one," he told her, nettled. "Big mistake." The Straw Hats get angry. It was hard to see through the steam produced by this room. It seemed as thick as pea soup, and the reality of it was that it was supposed to be like that. The Dream Blissfully Spa was a unique spa even within the aptly named Spa Island. Like any spas, it was a relaxing place to unwind and soak in the hot waters until you felt rejuvenated. For this particular spa though, it had many different features to it, all of which were meant to relax a person into a dreamlike state of mind and body. Steam so thick it was like clouds or sheep. Water heated to a temperature far more inviting than the hotter waters in other spas. Soothing music washing out the unfiltered noise outside. And beautiful murals painted around mellow meadows, soothing seas, and tranquil forests. Anyone could unwind here and forget the problems of the outside world for a mere few minutes of their time. There was absolutely no stress within this spa.
Except for two young girls. With a sudden slam of the door, breaking the tranquility of this spa, Mika and Rina came running it without concern for the atmosphere of the room.
Carefully, the girls made their way across the room, avoiding the half-naked people walking around and the pools of water sectioned into different areas of the room. After a few moments of hurried walking, it's dangerous to run around a spa or pool. They soon reached the other side of room and exited. Of course, these exits were actually the changing rooms and they hadn't checked which one they went in. Therefore, a lot of grown men and some boys were either shocked, surprised, or even embarrassed as the girls ran past them. Thankfully, a rather thick steam was also within the men's changing room and thusly covered their private parts for the girls. Once they were out, shutting the door quickly behind them, the two girls stopped and rested a little in the towel room. They also grabbed a few towels nearby as they were covered in both sweat and water residue. Once they were dry, they then booked it outside the room and back into the hallway where straight down was an elevator to bring them to their destination. "We made," Mika shouted cheerfully, just before slowly stopping in front of the elevator doors. "Yeah," Rina said with a smile. She then pushed the up button on the wall before speaking to Mika. "We really outsmarted those weirdos this time." In response, Mika giggled with excitement. "I hope we can make it to Mama and Daddy before Akio and Seo can." Rina looked at Mika in disbelief. "Do you think we really should worry about who gets where first?" "Yeah," Mika said surely. "I don't want to lose to Akio." Rolling her eyes, Rina couldn't believe she was hearing, but nonetheless enjoyed it. She wasn't quite as childish to want to beat her sister in a race, especially with their lives seemingly on the line, but she could appreciate the enthusiasm the younger girl was unintentionally giving. She hoped though that her sister was okay and that she and Akio had made it to this pirate crew that both he and Mika claimed were strong. Now, they just had to get there themselves. Eventually, the lights above the metal doors signaled that the metal box had arrived. The girls were ready to enter the box, or possibly step aside in case anyone was coming. However, when the doors opened, they both heard a shout, slow beam, and were both hit with a pink beam. "Do you see them?" asked Seo worriedly, standing on top of part of a fake rock formation. Akio was scouting the area looking out for someone. Unfortunately, with so many people being here, it was nearly impossible to see who he was looking for. So he replied with some frustration, "No, I can't find either Mika or the captain and everyone anywhere." This only made the young girl worry more. "You don't think Rina and Mika got captured, do you?" "I hope not," Akio said, grimacing slightly. He understood it was entirely possible that Foxy and his cohorts got them, but he believed there may still be hope. "I'll keep looking," he stated determinedly to the older kid. "Who knows, maybe they just got a little distracted or had to take a longer route to escape them." Seo was surprised but smiled and then nodded understandingly. She returned to searching from the ground level as a second pair of eyes could help. And with Nucky, who was also searching around, that made three. Oddly, despite being perspective, Akio had failed to notice a familiar person coming around the rock. "Huh, Akio?" spoke Usopp with surprise, holding 2 ice cream cones. "What you doing up there, buddy?" Hearing his voice, Akio quickly looked down to see the long-nosed sniper. "Mr. Usopp," he shouted, "We need everyone's help." "Huh?" Usopp said confused. After coming down off the rock and introducing Seo, Akio explained her and their situation quickly.
Immediately upon hearing that Foxy and his group were involved, Usopp had let out a tired sigh, but understood. He then took the kids over to where most of the Straw Hats had gathered, now including Sanji, Frankie and Brook. Already, the group knew that Foxy and his cohorts were on Spa Island thanks to their accounts. Akio quickly explained to the group what had happened with them, the kids. And with Seo's added information of the gem-making process, they understood why they were here.
Being able to make a gem, Nami thought out loud. Then, she began grinning happily, practically greedily, and a little twinkle shined in her eyes. "We would never have to worry about money ever again. We could buy anything we want," Chopper stated amazed. Brook commented, "Not if this Mr. Foxy gets his hands on the method first." Usopp scoffed. "Yeah, like those guys can catch Mika," he stated confidently. "She probably already has them exhausted from running all over the place." "Hold on a minute." Sanji spoke up with concern. "Foxy is one tricky bastard, and Mikaheim isn't very familiar with his methods." "Come on, Sanji," Usopp said with a nervous smile, "you can't believe that. She is only a child." Frankie stated frowning. Robin spoke now, "Seriously, we can't always be so lucky." Things suddenly became a little grimmer for the group. Nami had instantly shelved her greedier nature and replaced it with a great amount of concern and worry.
The others around had lost their optimism over the situation and now were becoming on edge. Luffy, who had been listening while still eating, had stopped what he was doing. His enormous appetite now took the back burner as he became more serious. Akio was becoming nervous and uncomfortable, being racked with guilt, as he could feel the tension in the air. Even Seo couldn't help but feel a little ashamed having dragged these people, Mika and Akio especially, into her family's problem.
"I'm sorry," she spoke suddenly, apologetically. "I didn't mean to put Mika in harm. Everything just happened so fast, Luffy spoke up calmly, "Don't worry about it." He then stood up from the table. "No matter what, we're going to find her." "Yeah," Usopp said determinedly. Nothing says that they were captured yet anyway. Do not worry, Mr. Akio. Brooke said, placing a comforting yet bony hand upon the boy's shoulder. Your idea was a good one for the situation. We'll recover Mika. Though still a little nervous, Akio nevertheless nodded. Okay. Nami then added caringly as she spoke to Seo, we'll find your sister too. Thank you. Seo said, smiling. Alright, Luffy shouted to his crew. Everyone, let's find Mika before Foxy does. Yash. Meanwhile in his room, Doran sat in lighted darkness at his desk with many monitors behind him providing mood lighting. He looked to be waiting patiently as he clapped his fingers together seemingly impatiently. But soon, there came a knock on his door. He stopped his mindless action and immediately turned on the lights to his room. The lights revealed his office to be a rather plain and typical room for any owner of a business with little personality to speak of. Once the lights were on, Doran then stood up from his desk, PS face a calm and polite smile. Come in. The door opened. Hello, partner. Immediately, Foxy greeted Doran cheerfully as he and his crew entered the room. Under Hamburg's arms, he had Mika and Rina tied up. Both attempted to struggle out, but found that they could not. Let go of us, shouted Rina irritably. When my daddy gets a hold you guys, you all are gonna be so beaten up, Mika threatened angrily. Instantly, Doran's business expression turned to a greedily cheerful one as he moved around his desk. Excellent work, Foxy, the silver fox, he greeted eagerly. I take it they had the notebook on them? Foxy grinned and then looked over his shoulder to his female compatriot, Porge. The blue-green-haired woman immediately stepped forward, pulling out the notebook from her cleavage. Here ya go, she said, holding the notebook out. Hey, Mika shouted furiously. That's not yours. Excellent, Doran said happily, ignoring the girl's shout, before receiving the book. He then swiftly looked through the book until he stopped, having found what he needed. The gem-making process, this is it. Phew, fei. Great, Foxy laughed out cheerfully. Now we can finally become rich beyond our wildest dreams. Oh goody. Porge cheered out excitedly. Yeah, Hamburg also cheered out, before snickering uncontrollably. Yeah, good luck with that, Rina said to the group sarcastically. Huh? Foxy said, curious over the girl's attitude, and also suspicious. And why do you say that, girlie? Because the process is incomplete. Rina stated, mad but assuredly. Our liar dad never explained how to make it, just the ingredients and this stupid hint that lead us here. Looking at the page again, Doran's smile turned into a frown. She's right. He failed to mention the method in which to combine the ingredients to form the gem. Foxy huffed disappointingly. Sneaky bastard, but no matter, he stated confidently. That other girl looked smart enough to figure out the method. Let's just go capture her as well. Leave Seo alone, shouted Rina enraged, beginning to struggle in her binds again. Set those brats down, Hamburg, Foxy ordered. We need to get our hands on the other girl. Actually, Doran spoke now, wearing a conniving smile. I have another idea. Do tell. Let's hold that loud-mouthed girl hostage, Doran stated sinisterly, referring to Rina. Then, she'll come to us. Foxy let out a laugh. Phew, fei, excellent idea, partner. Doran then turned to face the monitors, each one showing some part of Spa Island. Despite not seeing the older girl, Seo, in any of the screens, he kept grinning, looking optimistic. Once we find her, we'll make our demands known, he said while he began pushing buttons, changing the images on the screens. While they waited, Porch was becoming excitedly impatient. I can't believe we're so close to getting rich, boss, she said before taking out a bookmark with a clover in it. This 5-leaf clover really is lucky. Immediately, Rina gasped quietly. What, a 5-leaf clover? Foxy questioned curiously, not hearing the girl. Where did you get that? I found it tucked away in the notebook. Oh, what a rare find, Foxy said, impressed. They say 5-leaf clovers are even luckier than the regular 4-leaf ones. It must be a sign of our success. Then, the adults quickly became busy searching for the older girl on the monitors. This practically left the kids to themselves. They both remained quiet for a time. Rina especially so, as she looked to be in deep thought. At this, Mika had noticed and asked curiously, what's wrong, Rina? Rina immediately looked to the girl, now appearing conflicted. It's just that bookmark with the 5-leaf clover. I had found it when I was out searching for 4-leaf clovers with Seo and our dad. Seo had gotten really lucky and found, like, 4 of them. Me and dad weren't doing so well, but he told me something was pretty cool. Yeah, Mika said, intrigued. He told me that because Seo never gave up, she was able to find those clovers. And that if you set your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. Then, you know what I did? What? That I could find a 5-leaf clover, Rina said, beginning to smile as she recalled this fond memory of her with her father. How she eventually fawned and how happy her father was for her in finding the impossible. This memory, which she had forgotten once, began making her tear up as feelings of joy and guilt began plaguing her mind. And I did. Mika giggled quietly. My daddy always tells me you have to stubborn to reach your dream. Now, it was Rena's turn to laugh. I think getting a gem is more like a goal than a dream. Oh yeah. Mika said in realization. Still, she grinned looking determined. Well, I still want to see it anyways, and show it to everyone. Rena smiled. And if we're gonna see it, we definitely got to make sure that they don't get Sayo. Yeah, Mika said determined but quiet. But how are we gonna warn her? Rena asked rhetorically, seeing how they were stuck in their current predicament. Mika tried racking her brain in hope that some idea will form. When none came immediately, she sat herself up and began looking around the room. Thankfully, the adults were all focused on looking for Sayo on the monitors. As Mika spied at the desk, she caught sight of the transponder snail on it. Instantly, an idea arose. I got an idea. Rena didn't know what Mika's plan was, but she nodded anyway. Anything would be better than letting those creeps get to her sister. Mika, Namika, Lil, Sis, Mika Heim, Rena. Nucky Nucky. Hey Zoro, shouted Usopp. Where the hell are you? Nearly everywhere, one and all of the Straw Hats, and Sayo and Nucky, were shouting out the name of their cherished ones. With the exception of Zoro, they were just trying to find him because it would be a hassle otherwise. It didn't matter where they called, the lazy river, the pool, the water slides, and anywhere in between, they searched for the little girls. It was bothering quite a few people, rather selfish and closed-minded people at that, but none of them cared. Finding Mika and making sure she was okay was far more important than the opinions of strangers. Unfortunately, none of them were having any luck, any of them. And it was starting to become all the clearer that something may be wrong, but they continued the search nonetheless. Eventually, they all gathered back together again, all disappointed from not being able to find the kids. They clearly are not on this deck, Robin stated with affirmation. Then we look inside. Nami said determinedly. Everyone instantly agreed. As they were about to head inside, with the hope of having better luck, the entire transponder snail speaker system suddenly let out sort of pitch noise like when a microphone was too close to another electronic that both baffled and annoyed everyone that heard it. What the, stated Usopp confused, representing the same interest as his group. Hey, suddenly, Doran's voice could be heard throughout the facility, though his voice seemed a little distanced from the receiver and sounded shocked. Seemingly without knowledge that the whole island was hearing him, the man continued on to speak. What do you think you're doing, you brat? Mika's voice came out next, sounding very close to the receiver compared to Doran's and much more in distress. Hell. She was then silenced. An audible smack could be heard through the speaker system. Am I? Another voice came out, another girl sounding in distress, but the message was cut off as the speaker system went offline. To the patrons, they were confused by what had just happened. Though most did not know who was speaking through the speakers, for both Doran and Mika, they were frankly concerned by what they heard. Even without knowing who it was, it sounded like there was something serious going on within Spa Island, and that it may have to do with the staff of it as well. But before anyone could even begin to make sense of what they heard, a sudden intent washed over them like a waterfall. Whatever they had been feeling previously was now replaced with a sense of terror. Like instinct, they all seemed to know where it was coming from as well.
Every single person looked towards the middle of the deck,
where the Straw Hats stood absolutely still. Every single one of them, with the exception of the kids, was exerting an intense amount of killing intentions. Visually, their eyes were covered in dark shadows as if a dark cloud now overshadowed them. And for all intents and purposes, there was one. And upon seeing this group, nearly everyone fell into horror. Even the Akio and Sayo, despite their own feelings of outrage and fear for their friends, were caught completely in fear of this group of adults, these pirates' intense emotions that felt even heavy for the building itself to hold. Even worst, it even felt like another strong killing intent was exuding from beneath them as well. Almost equal in size to the group's own killing intent. And in that instant, everyone instinctively knew what was coming next. A rampage meanwhile inside the office building of Spa Island. Doran stood over the kids looking menacing and threatening. Though her plan worked, having reached the snail and gotten some sort of message out, Mika had received a nasty slap to her face. To the point that her cheek was red and slightly swollen. The poor girl felt like crying, having never been attacked before, but she willed herself not to. Instead, while keeping her tears held back, she glared at the owner mad and frustrated, but helpless to do anything more at this point.
Rena on the other hand looked scared, having both witnessed Doran's action and now his current mood. Foxy and his cohorts though were hardly bothered by the action, mostly because it barely concerned them, but there was still a feeling of disapproval within their minds. Especially since the girl that was hurt was the one that had given Foxy such a heartwarming compliment. Not even Hamburg, known for snickering at any given time, did not let out his usual guffaw.
Hey, man, Foxy spoke slightly frowning, take it easy, she's only a child. Still looking enraged, Doran now directed it at Foxy. Oh, be quiet, he stated harshly, that brat nearly ruined my resort's image. Oh, Prosh said sorrowful as she crouched down next to the girl. Mika, poor sweetie. I'm sorry that happened, but you shouldn't mess around with adults. Mika still looked mad at the group, still keeping back from crying and trying to look tough, Nevertheless, she did speak in a low tone. You guys are really gonna be trouble now. And why's that? Asked Doran, still peeved. Because your parents heard you over the speaker. Oh, spare me. What will they do? File a complaint? Nope. Mika said assuredly. They're gonna wreck your entire, stupid place. Rena looked surprised at her friend. Mika, and how will they do that? Doran asked in ridicule. Boom. Like a divine answer, an explosion suddenly occurred outside the building. Despite that, it still shook the building itself. The sudden shaking nearly threw the ne'er-do-wells off balance, but they remained standing nonetheless. Boom, boom. Then, more started coming forth, soon followed by screams of panicking people. And yet, over the screams of hundreds of people, a single shout roared over them all like a ferocious beast. Mika, terrified and confused. Doran began sweating profusely. WHWH, what is going on? He shouted before running over to the window. Pulling back the curtains that shielded the room from natural light, the sight that which Doran saw was horrifying. His once beautiful and picturesque resort was now in ruin. Stands and stalls wrecked beyond repair. Pools smashed and water now seeping down into the lower levels, potentially ruining decor inside. Fake facades turned to literal rubble. Electrical equipment exposed and sparking dangerously. Water slides fallen down and the pristine, marble tile cracked, uprooted, and destroyed beyond hope of recovery. The water park deck looked more like a battlefield than what it formerly had been. And still, more destruction came from all manner of sources. Bullets, lightning, fists, feet, and swords tore through everything he had built like it was paper. His guard staff, usually protecting the docks below, were rushing in to quell the destruction, but they were merely ants caught in a storm. Almost instantaneously, they were all defeated with a combination of several attacks. And even, as if cementing this place's doom, the floor erupted and broke apart as a vicious cyclone tore through from beneath. A shout, Tatsumaki, could be heard within the spiral as a lone man seemed to fly unharmed within it, only to land safely on the floor, 2 swords in hand and 1 in his mouth. This man exerted a tremendous killing intent that nearly made Doran wet his pants. It was then that he realized, his paradise within, paradise, was coming to an end. Dragon Twister. But you knew that. No, shrieked Doran in horror. Becoming worried, Foxy rushed over to look outside. Instantly, he gasped at the sight. What? See? Mika said, grinning deviously. Told ya. Again. Rena was surprised despite not being able to see that actual damage. Whoa, Mika. Child. Foxy shouted as he looked back at Mika. Who exactly are your parents? Keeping her grin, she told him slowly, almost like torturing him. Monkey. Foxy said nervously. Foxy said again, now frantic. Luffy. Foxy screamed out in panic. Likewise, his crewmates too were in panic. BB boss, Port shouted. Did we just kidnap Straw Hat's kid? Foxy shouted out in horror. And allowed her to get hurt? We didn't even know he had a kid. And everyone heard what happened over the speakers too, Porch added, terrified. Foxy looked back outside upon hearing his name roared out with rage. Near instantly, he spotted Luffy. And unfortunately for him, it looked like Luffy had spotted him as well. Ah! Screamed Foxy as he frantically stepped back and away from window. He then shouted with his back against the wall, he's pissed. Mika smirked smugly. Told ya. That's it, shouted Doran frustrated, having witnessed the same. Our partnership is over. What? Shouted the Foxy group. Doran quickly got away from the window. He rushed over to Rena and picked the girl up by her bounds. I'm keeping the girl in the notebook, he said, holding the notebook out with his other hand. You can have Straw Hat's daughter. Like hell, shouted Foxy enraged. I'm not staying here to take the blame. Yeah, Porch and Hamburg agreed determinedly. Doran soon realized that he had made a grievous error in judgment. Not only had he broke off his partnership with maybe the only persons able to protect him, but it was likely that the pirates that were currently destroying his facility knew that it was he that struck the child. Worst, he just made his former partners his enemies. Not a smart move either. It may be for naught that he was going to try and hold the girl in his arms hostage. More than likely, nothing but a quick escape would his only chance of making it out of here. Taking the girl would be a hassle, but maybe the only way to get either her sister or the man himself to create the gem. He just had to escape. And then, something crashed into the room. The suddenness of it all sent Doran and Foxy's group screaming in fright. In his shock, Doran had dropped both Rena, who was also shocked by the event, and the notebook on the floor. As the dust began to settle, a figure could be seen standing within the cloud. At first darkened and shaded by the large amount of dust in the air, it soon faded away, revealing the, mostly uninjured, Monkey D. Luffy. No one in the room moved. Nearly all were frozen still with fear. Those looking at the Straw Hat wearing, pirate captain could tell that he was absolutely livid. And he had yet to even look at them. SSS Straw Hat, Foxy said nervously yet forcing a happy grin, attempting to greet friend. He continued on speaking as he walked forward to the young man appearing submissive. Long time. No see, old friend. You're looking rather healthy. Oh, by the way, congrat. Unfortunately for Foxy, having gotten too close and far too biddable, he was immediately punched by Luffy. The sudden attack had instantly knocked him out and sent him flying through and out the room into the sky. Soon, he disappeared into the endless blue sky with only a twinkle of light left behind, signaling his departure. "B-boss," shouted Porch and Hamburg in shock. Immediately, the two Foxy pirates took off to rescue their captain, thus, leaving Doran on his own. Having witnessed the sheer power of this pirate, Doran was nearly in panic. He thought about running away, but instead, he tried to play the innocent. Oh, thank. It worked about half less than Foxy's own attempt to save himself and crew. Before Doran could even explain himself, which would have been fake anyway, Luffy had sent his fist flying, stretching actually, and punched the man. Luffy may be foolish at times, but even he could make a connection instantly upon hearing the man's voice. Like Foxy, he too was sent through his room, the door specifically, and flew off his facility. It was likely that he landed into the ocean, very much unconscious and bleeding. His fate left to the mercy of the Grand Line. Wow, Rina said, both in shock and awe. Now, with his perceived enemies, really just jerks, gone. Luffy began to calm down. All right, he said before he began looking around the room. Mika? Ow, Luffy heard the small noise and his eyes widened. He looked around the desk quickly and found Mika under a few, fairly sized, pieces of debris on top of her. Mika, he shouted afraid before rushing over to her side. After knocking off the chunks of broken wall, Luffy stared down at his daughter for a moment. She was definitely injured, a fairly sized bruise on her shoulder from where some of the debris landed. Her arm seemed slightly red, probably from moving around in the rope. She seemed to have acquired a few scratches with one of them bleeding slightly from her head. Mika was indeed hurt, but it seemed that many of her worst, though minor, injuries had not come from the man or Foxy. Rather, it came from his own recklessness and rage, though he didn't show it, his expression remaining mostly blank if not concern for his daughter. Luffy was in absolute horror of his own actions. Unintentional or otherwise, he had hurt his daughter. What kind of a father was he to hurt his own child? Thoughts like these, ones he hadn't thought in a long time, re-emerged and began battering his confidence, whittling it down to self-doubt and fear. It was only when his daughter finally sat up, looking none too concerned over her pain, and expressed her joy in seeing him that he broke away from his tortuous thoughts. Daddy, Mika said, now sat fully up on her knees, grinning. Seeing her happy, Luffy smiled. Hey sweetie, he said warmly. Mika giggled, she, ow. Her laughing had agitated something on her within her that hurt, but only momentarily. She continued on smiling, as if nothing were wrong. I knew you would beat those guys up, Daddy. Luffy said nodding. He then began untying Mika's binds while the little girl continued on speaking. But that fox guy wasn't really that mean, Daddy. He was actually really funny. You shouldn't have punched him. Luffy replied back optimistically, he'll be okay. Splithead is pretty stubborn. He then removed the rope from off his daughter. Okay, Mika said with complete belief happily. Now free. Mika stood up stretching all her body with great relief. Both Luffy and Mika heard the voice and looked over to see Rina, still tied up and looking slightly uncomfortable in her position on the floor. Could you untie me now too? Sure. When one dream ends another begins. Farewell, Straw Hat family. Now resting, nearly all of the Straw Hats sat around waiting for their captain to return with their precious child. Only Nami remained standing, behaving far more worried now than earlier when she had joined her crew on the rampage. It was likely that until she saw Mika she would not relax. The kids and Nucky stood along with her also worried. Even after witnessing a true act of rage and destruction, all for the name of rescuing one kid, honestly, neither of them were much afraid to be around the group. If anything, they felt a little sorry for everyone else who had to witness it, and the owner, who would surely be paying for all of this. Nami, Zoro called out from his spot among the circle, relax already. Yeah, Luffy's probably already got her. Usopp spoke as well, confidently. Nami didn't reply back. She hardly even responded to either of what her crewmates said. Her motherly instincts would not let her rest until she saw her child safe. And already, she was dreading to see that potential injury she was sure to see upon Mika from Doran. Hey, everyone looked towards the main building, now partially destroyed, as they heard the familiar shout of their captain. They watched as Luffy stepped outside with Rina walking along with him and Mika on his back. Instantly upon seeing Mika's missing tooth smile and waving towards them, the Straw Hats felt a wave of relief overcome them. Especially Nami, who felt reassurance upon seeing her family. And upon seeing her sister, Sayo was overwhelmed with joy that his sister was okay. Rina, Sayo shouted with tears of joy before rushing to her. Seeing her sister, Rina overcome with joy and relief. Sayo, she said before running as well. She and her sister soon met in the middle and hugged each other tightly. I'm so glad you're safe, Sayo told her sister relieved. Rina nodded. You too. Leaping onto the girls, Nucky let out a cheery bark showing his own joy for the girls. Upon realizing it was him, the girls quickly wrapped the sea raccoon into their hug celebrating their reunion. While that family shared a moment, Luffy continued walking past them though smiling for them. He only had to take a few more steps before Nami came up to him. Luffy, she said worriedly, but not towards the man himself. Instantly, Mika greeted her mother with a cheerful grin. Hi mama. Though she was about to greet her little girl, Nami stopped as she became aware of her daughter's physical condition. She could see the scrapes and bruises that covered the young girl's body. Looking even closer, she saw a red residue on her daughter's face, from blood no doubt, as well as her slightly swollen cheek. It was more than what she was expecting. As Luffy approached her, they both stared at each other. Nami showed her concern and yet also curiosity pertaining to her daughter's condition. It was like she was asking him, silently. And Luffy, who knew exactly that, his stare showed something she hadn't expected, shame and disappointment. She couldn't tell why he was like this but, for the moment, she would not ask until later. As the crew joined them, meeting Luffy as he reached Nami, they too noticed the girl's condition. Shock was practically on all their faces, though the likes of Zoro remained calm despite frowning. Their expressions however quickly evaporated as Mika soon addressed to them. I'm back, the little girl said happily, showing no signs of ill contempt or pain towards them. Akio answered before anyone, welcome back, sounding seemingly annoyed but happy as shown by his smile. With the young cabin boy breaking the ice, the rest of the crew relaxed and began happily greeting the girl. Seeing that she was still smiling, they figured that she was okay. But the nature of her injuries would be one to discuss about later. Chopper, Luffy spoke, give Mika a checkup, make sure she's okay. Daddy, whined the young girl annoyed, I'm fine. Chopper nodded to his captain determinedly. You got it, Luffy. He then immediately transformed into his heavy point form, which made Mika far more conforming due to how cool it was for her to see her uncle transform. Gently, he then took Mika from off Luffy's back. I want to ride on top, Mika stated before crawling out of Chopper's large forearms. While a rough climb, she eventually seated herself around Chopper's now human-like head. Content and happy. Let's go. Of course, Chopper was okay with this. Observationally, she looked to have suffered nothing major like a broken bone. So, as he began to move with the sunny in mind, he made sure to warn the girl. Make sure you warn me if you are about to hit your head. Okay. Usopp soon spoke. I guess with Mika back, we should be leaving too, he said looking around at their ruined spa resort. Honestly, Zoro stated clutching his sword and frowning mad, I'm not done letting out some steam. I second that motion, Sanji said calm but frowning. I think we've done enough to this place, Robin said observationally, and Foxy and Doran have been properly punished. Luffy nodded. Yeah, yet remained half-hearted, much to curiousness of the crew. Akio spoke up sounding nervous. I know that it's not really our concern, but Mika and I were trying to help Rina and Sao figure out how to make a gem. Oh yeah, Usopp said in realization. With Foxy and that other guy gone, we can probably find the secret now. Overhearing the group, Sao and her family approached the group. But we've already looked everywhere, she told them disappointingly. And that Doran guy didn't seem to know what the secret was either, Rina added. Quite the quandary, Brooks spoke while he thought over the situation. Having thought over it himself, Frankie had a suggestion. Well, maybe dismantling the whole place might be a good idea then. At this point, it couldn't hurt, Usopp stated looking around at the already destroyed deck. All right, guys, Luffy said smiling, seemingly returning to his more energetic state. He then cracked his knuckles determinedly as he gave out the order, let's finish the job. After the more fragile members of the crew and the kids returned to the Sunny and sailed it out of port, the rest of the Straw Hats got to work destroying the facility. With everyone gone, it was a cinch to freely destroy everything. Though, Luffy seemed to be doing some extra hard destroying. In time, the whole fake island fell into the sea, and immediately something else took its place. From beneath the waters, where an X-shaped fissure was located, it created a steaming effect and then revealed upon everyone a beautiful circular rainbow with the colors flowing in reverse order. Because Spa Island had been built on top of this fissure, it blocked this glorious sight as well as siphoned the heat for the pools. And upon seeing this odd formation, Sao finally understood what the last instruction was to make a gem. Let's make the gem, Rina told her sister determinedly. Sao looked down surprised at her sister. It was only an hour or so ago when the young girl had been badmouthing their father. Now, she seemed like her old self, cheerful and optimistic. Whatever had happened to her sister, she was glad that she could finally understand what they were doing. All right. Sao told her sister equally as determined. The Straw Hats were happy enough to give the family a ride back to their home island. It would not take them much time as the girls lived on one of the nearby islands near Spa Island. The voyage was unusually silent, at least, on the adults' part. The kids of course were still playing happily and ignorant of what had befell on the adults' minds. Even Luffy, the most exuberant of all the Straw Hats with the exception of his own daughter, simply sat at his special seat upon Sunny's figurehead, silent with thought. By the time they reached the island it was already late into the afternoon. At first, it was only going to be a simple drop-off, but by the time they had docked plans had be. You want to go with the girls to see them make the gem? Yeah, please. Nami should have expected her husband's daughter, even after getting bandaged up, would still want to be active. It didn't help make her case either seeing Mika's huge and excited grin. She couldn't say no to that. Especially since, the girl had worked hard trying to protect her friends to hopefully show them, her and the crew, this gem. And seeing how the worst was behind them, very much literally, she didn't see the harm in obliging the girl. Okay, Nami said with a smile. After Mika then released a cheer, she quickly added one stipulation, but Akio has to come too. Sure, Mika said happily. After informing Akio, he didn't mind tagging along. He and Mika went ashore with Rina and Seo. The girls were happy enough to have the company, and to once and for all prove their father's work to someone. As the group rushed into the small village, the village just outside the girls' house, a few of the Straw Hats watched with a cautious gaze of the surroundings. Once the kids had all disappeared into the town, the crew soon began to gather on the deck. All of them had serious expressions of both concern and worry. The events of earlier had still plagued their minds even by the time they had docked. Luffy, Zoro spoke first to his captain. You gotta tell us what's been on your mind. Surprisingly, Luffy was quiet at first. He even looked a little nervous. A strange sight indeed when it didn't involve the theft of food. Eventually thought, with everyone looking at him anxiously, Luffy revealed upon them his thoughts. Just stuff, he said vaguely. What's going on with you? Nami asked calmly though also worried. You're not behaving like yourself. Robin quickly got to the point. It has to do with Mika, doesn't it? Hitting the nail on the head, Luffy pursed his lips. This surprised nearly everyone. Is this about her injuries? Asked Frankie confused. They weren't really that bad, Chopper stated trying to ease his captain. But she had so many. Brook rebutted cautiously. I can't believe that miscreant could harm our Mika so much. Yeah, but Luffy taught him a lesson. Usopp stated proudly before looking to his captain for confirmation, right?
Luffy's response was far from pleasing the sniper. The man lowered his head shamefully with the shade of his hat covering his eyes. He then muttered lowly, it wasn't him.
What? Usopp said confused. Are you saying Foxy did that to Mika? That bastard, Sanji said slowly becoming enraged. Quickly though, Luffy shook his head in rejection. No. One of his two cronies? Usopp asked befuddled. Again, Luffy shook his head. No. Wait, Nami said confounded. If it wasn't Doran or Foxy or his goons, then who? It was my fault. Luffy stated clearly though dejectedly. What? Said everyone in shock. She got hurt because of me. Luffy admitted sadly. No Luffy, Nami said attempting to ease her lover's supposed burden. Mika got caught. This isn't the first time, but none have had any idea that. When I crashed through the building, Luffy began explaining, I didn't know she was in there. Nami frowned, Luffy, she got hit by all the rubble and junk from the wall. I thought I had crushed her. Wait, Luffy, Nami said trying her best to stop her husband, it was all just an ACC. Mika can't stay with us anymore. Far from the emotional turmoil, Mika and her friends were now walking out of the village heading towards the green pasture. Mika looked excited as she ran around with Nucky proclaiming proudly about getting a gem, her first treasure. Rina and Akio remained close by the girl, equally as excited at the prospect of making a gem. And Seo, being the oldest and matures, was simply smiling happily at both her younger sisters' reaffirmed belief in their father's project as well as at the enthusiasm of their new friends. How much do you think the gem is worth? Akio asked curiously. I haven't a clue. Rina admitted. Father speculated that it could be worth at least 1,000,000 Baileys. Seo stated optimistically. Whoa, Mika said amazed. That's way more than even Uncle Chopper's bounty. Yeah, Akio agreed though had a rebuttal. But Dr. Chopper is the only one in the crew with a bounty under even 100 belly. The little transforming raccoon dog? Rina recalled. Reindeer, both Mika and Akio corrected swiftly. Unconcerned about the correction, Rina then asked, why is his bounty so low? Actually, yeah, Akio said as he realized as well, why is that Mika? The pirate girl giggled facetiously. The dummy marines think he's a pet. Everyone else stopped for just a moment. They all recalled Chopper, and how he looks simply too adorable and cute to really be considered a pirate. At least, in his brainpoint form. Then, they all spoke in agreement, yeah, I guess that's right. Then, the whole group shared a great laugh. For the kids, it was because they believed that adults could be silly sometimes. Seo laughed because the situation called for it. They kept laughing even as they neared the girls' home. But as they stopped, they soon heard the jumble of noise coming from the house. It spooked the group. Someone's in our house. Rina whispered afraid. Before anyone else could do or say something, the door suddenly swung open. Get out of here, "You no good thieves!" Out came a man shouting while waving a gun. He didn't look all that intimidating, but being panicky definitely frightened the kids. The kids quickly ducked down to avoid being potentially shot. Hearing the screams, the man soon stopped his wild display. Huh? He then looked over the area and noticed that it was only children that had come near his house. Oops. The man said, embarrassed before lowering the gun. "Sorry, kids. I thought you were some bad people." Rina and Seo soon looked up. They both gasped as they quickly recognized the man. "Father, Daddy." Surprised, the man looked again at the children. He gasped as well before shouting, "Rina, Seo." Immediately, the man dropped the gun and ran over to his children. Both girls stood up and also rushed over to their father to meet him halfway. Their father instantly wrapped his two precious daughters in a hug as he both laughed and cried out in joy that his daughters were okay. Rina and Seo were the same, happy to see their father was all right as well. Even Nucky joined the group. He jumped right into them, and being so small enough, fitted right in with them. Of course, the human family was happy to have their sea raccoon pet join them. As the family exchanged joyously their now unclaimed worries and fears for relief, Mika and Akio watched unhappily. It only lasted a while though before Mika decided to ruin the mood. "Can we see the gem now?" Meanwhile, back at the Thousand Sunny, things had turned rather badly. Monkey D. Luffy, a man worth 300 million Baileys, was sprawled out on the grass deck with a black eye and hat knocked off. He looked unnerved by his situation. Around him, most of the crew had their jaws agape in shock, but none of it directed at Luffy. Those gazes were actually directed at Nami, who stood where Luffy once had been. By how she was poised, with her hair shading partially over her enraged expression, she looked to throw a punch. A wickedly strong punch at that. She was also breathing out heavily, indicating even more so to the amount of strength that she may have put into her punch. "Nami," Sanji said aghast. Then, Nami shouted angrily, "You want to say that again, you bastard." "Nami," Robin shouted appalled. Luffy soon sat up. Still, he looked unfazed by what his wife said. He stretched out and took his hat off the ground and placed back on his head. Then, he responded calmly, "I said Mika can't stay with us anymore." Enraged again, Nami was about to jump the man and sock him again. Before she could move to do so, Zoro suddenly stepped in front of her, effectively stopping her. "Zoro," she shouted irate. "What are you doing, Zoro?" Usopp said fearful. "Oh, the sniper." Zoro continued looked down at Nami. He then asked her sternly, "What do you think you're doing?" Being asked like that only helped to fuel the woman's anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Stopping you from taking things too far," the green-haired man stated. "What?" Robin soon joined alongside with Zoro, expressing both sadness and disapproval. "Nami, please calm down." "Shut up," Nami shouted unsettled, surprising even Robin. "Do you even hear what he was saying? He wants to get rid of Mika." "No, he said that she should no longer stay with us," Robin asserted calmly. "That's not the same and you know it." Nami clenched her teeth with frustration. She felt like her own crew was turning against her and her daughter. "Fine," she shouted, sounding betrayed. "If Mika's been such a bother to you all, then you can leave her and me on." Slap! Nami was suddenly silenced as she felt the sting of Robin's hand. Like before, everyone looked at the scene with shock. This being the first time Robin had ever reacted as such to anyone, even more so Nami. Even the young navigator, despite the pain, was in shock that her older sister figure had just hit her. As tears swelled in her eyes, from many emotions conflicting with each other, Nami looked back at the woman with confusion, currently most prominent feeling within her mind, and placed her own hand on her tender cheek. "Robin, don't say that," Robin said venomously. Her own emotions had been risen to a point that she had not experienced since back at Eni's lobby, when she declared her intent on living again with her crew. This was not the same as then. Anger and disappointment at the young woman before her and relied her up. Her hand had then moved on its own like if her own devil fruit power had a mind of its own, and though it surprised her, she didn't regret doing so. Now though, Robin's own tears began to swell in her eyes, surprising everyone including Nami. As she spoke again though, she smiled, placing away her ill feelings towards her crewmate. "Do you think Mika has ever been a bother to us? To me? I love Mika. So very much. We all do. None of us would ever want for her to leave." Nami could not speak. With her other hand, as the first was still preoccupied with her reddened cheek, Nami used it to cover her mouth. Regret and shame starting to accumulate within her mind and forcing her tears to fall down as she listened to Robin.
"But you're not behaving like a parent," Robin continued, "you're behaving like a child whose toy is being taken away."
"I can't say I understand completely our captain's reasons." As she said this, she looked over to Luffy, who still remained sitting at his spot. She then continued on, now looking at Nami and the crew, "But we all know he doesn't make such rash decisions if he didn't feel confident enough with them. And I'm sure he has his reasons." Everyone began to notice that Robin was beginning to sound sad as she continued speaking. As to why, she soon gave clear reason when saying, "I too can think of some reasons. as I'm sure you all can as well. Uncomfortably, Chopper was the first to speak. Mika's been kidnapped 3 times now. Usopp went next, looking dejected. She's gotten pretty badly hurt recently. I accidentally injured her, Luffy stated miserably. Frowning madly, Frankie followed the tangent. Lil Sis came super close to being taken away by the Marines too. And much of it happened on our watch as well, Brook stated dismally. She can't really take care of herself without one of us being around, Sanji added, crestfallen. She can't defend herself either, Zoro stated comfortless. She lacks foresight, Robin stated cautious and unhappy. To everyone's surprise, Nami had spoken up a little. They all looked towards her, wondering what she was going to say. The orange-haired woman looked like she was trying to force herself to say something. And eventually she did. She's reckless, stubborn, full of herself, ignorant, far too trusting, scheming, rude, curious as a cat, and. Suddenly, Nami had a realization. Taking into account all she said, a simple truth had hit her like a ton of bricks. And like those bricks, the truth had been heavy on her, making her collapse to the deck, much to the surprise of everyone. Then, while staring at Luffy and vice versa, she stated what she had come to realize. She's just like her parents. To say that no one else had come to this realization was untrue. Always, everyone knew Mika got much of her personality from her parents. Luffy more so than Nami. It was such a well-known fact that they had often overlooked the more troublemaking qualities. But in understanding that again, really understanding it, they all realized that Mika was not only in danger with them, but from herself as well. That fact alone made things clear. Mika can't stay with us anymore, Nami said, dispirited. And no one said another word after. Sitting in the home of Rina and Seo, Mika and Akio watched in amazement as the family worked hard to combine the ingredients that would make the gem. Such weird ones like 30-year-old cicada shells. Together, they mixed them all together in a unique fashion. Inspired by the uniqueness of the round and reverse rainbow back at the former site of Spa Island, they were able to integrate each ingredient carefully into the same way as said rainbow. Once the last one was stirred in, an amazing reaction occurred. The liquid rainbow concoction began glowing brightly, and nearly blinded everyone in the room. As the light dimmed after a few seconds, everyone looked into the beaker curiously. What they saw inside amazed them. It was a beautiful gem about the size of a large jawbreaker. It worked, the girl's father said, nearly speechless. My formula worked. Daddy, shouted Rina, overjoyed before hugging her father. You did it, you're not a quack at all. Nearly in tears from joy, Seo wiped them away with a smile. Not only had they been able to verify their father's work, but did so together as a family. Congratulations, she said to her father happily. Hearing her, the girl's father laughed and then enwrapped Seo into their hug. They all began laughing and jumping with joy, sharing the moment together. Eventually though, they remembered they had guests, but they were polite enough not to rush things. Or at least, Akio had been. Oh, pretty, Mika said, captivated with the gem. She had sneaked her way under to the table while everyone else had been distracted. Again, the girl's father laughed, though more softly and amused. Even I couldn't have guessed at how aesthetically pleasing the gem would be either. The man then reached over and picked the gem up from the beaker. Immediately, he happily held it out to the young girl, offering it to her. Here you go, Mika. As promised, 1 gem for helping my daughters. Despite knowing already, Mika couldn't help but gasps. Thanks, she said excitedly before snatching it out of the man's hand. She then held it up high, celebrating her victory. I got my first treasure. We got our first treasure, Akio stated correctively. He had been a part of the help too. In response, Mika brought the gem down and clutched it tightly to her chest. She then gave Akio an unimpressed look before stating clearly, mine, soon followed by her childishly sticking her tongue out at the boy. Hey, Akio responded back, mad. Said Seo nervously, attempting to bring peace to the 2 kids. We can always make another. You gotta at least make it a shared treasure, Akio stated single-mindedly. Seo's suggestion had gone completely unheard. Only if you pay a renter's fee, Mika stated matter-of-factly, 2 Baileys a day. I'll be broke in a week, you brat, shouted Akio outrageously. Mika thought it over for a moment. Then, she conceded. Okay, she said, 1 belly an hour. That's even worse. The family watched the children's banter, half worried and half amused. Honestly, they felt like making another gem would probably solve the expected that maybe the 2 pirate kids were simply just adhering to their original agreement. Only 1 gem. In the end, they could at least figure out one thing with this conversation. It was technically both their treasure, with Mika maintaining control over all assets, and that Akio was getting screwed over no matter what. None of them understood though how such a young girl had such a shrewd business sense. Let's go show everyone, Mika proclaimed suddenly with a grin. To this, Akio was immediately silenced from retorting his argument, which he says he's totally winning by the way. He was left completely discombobulated, thus, leaving his argument invalid to the girl. Mika and Akio then left the home of the family. Even though they had said their parting words already, the two girls and Nucky were still seeing the kids off. They both continued on waving with the little sea raccoon barking and doing cheerful flips. From the window, their father only smiled, silently wishing the two pirate kids well. Thus, as soon as the lone house of their friends disappeared one way or the other, Mika and Akio made their way back to the Thousand Sunny. Of course, both knew the way back, only, Mika tended to get easily distracted. Being a good friend, Akio helped her refocus her attention. Eventually though, the ship was in their sights. Immediately, Mika became excited and the two of them ran to the ship and eventually up the gangplank. No one was there to meet them though. In fact, the deck seemed eerily quiet for once. Despite how odd it was, neither child paid any mind to it. Especially not Mika, who was ready to show off her, treasure. "We're back," Mika shouted loudly, her voice full of excitement.
Akio looked around as they waited for their crew to come. He was surprised that no one hadn't already come to greet them, or Mika more specifically. It was very unlike them from what he had seen since joining them.
Coo! Coo! A sudden bird call caught their attention. They looked over and around until they spotted a news coo. A bird they had often seen delivering newspapers, fly off from the side of the upper cabins, where the kitchen and Chopper's medical room were. In its claws was a package, seemingly light enough for the bird to carry. Neither kid understood why the bird was here and had taken off so immediately upon their arrival, but it soon didn't matter. The kitchen cabin door soon opened, drawing their attention to it. Out soon came their crew, but not just from within. Robin and Nami had come from around the cabin, where the bird had flown off from. Nevertheless, the whole crew walked out to see the kids, and yet, they all had unusually surprised expressions on them, as if they had been caught in an act most heinous or simply displeasing. Akio had taken notice of this, but Mika was none the wiser. She was far too excited to show her family what they acquired, much like a pirate. "Looky!" Mika shouted joyfully as she pulled out the gem and held it up. "I got my first treasure." Forgetting his concerns over the crew, Akio quickly corrected her, "We got out first treasure." Slowly, the group of adults began reacting. Soon, they were all looking either happy or proud of the two kids' accomplishment. Yet, there still seemed to be a hint of sadness in some of the more mature adults like Nami, Sanji, and Robin. The others, except Zoro, seemed to have become overly excited over the prospect. "You did? Awesome," Usopp said proudly. "Come on, Lil, sis," Frankie said as he beckoned the girl to come forward. "You gotta show us your super gem up close." "This really calls for a celebration," Brooke proclaimed excitedly with violin and bow in hand. Instantly, Mika got even more excited. "Can we have a party please?" she asked eagerly. "Sure," Nami said with a smile. "Yay," cheered Mika along with many of the other members. "Another one?" Akio said astounded. In a matter of minutes, the deck of the Thousand Sunny was alive again with laughter and activity. It all happened surprisingly faster than usually, almost like it had been prepared in advance. Mostly relating to the food. For her part, Mika showed each and every one of her family the gem. Each one marveling in their own way at the gem and showing how proud and impressed they were at her. Akio wasn't left out either. He had been congratulated as well for his part and shown the same amount pride that they were giving Mika. Then soon, the games started. Once the gem was shown, and then safely placed away, Mika began playing with her father and uncles. Akio of course joined in as well. Zoro had been forced to join in too, despite it being something he was annoyed and irritated with. Mika had so much fun with her family. They played all manner of games, and her family showed her tricks and feats that she had never seen before. It was all amazing for her, and Akio as well. Even her mother and aunt joined in to show off, much to the joy of the others. It was probably the most fun that Mika and or Akio have had. However, as the party lasted longer, an edginess began to creep its way into each adult. It was noticeable in some. Usopp chuckling had some nervousness to it. Chopper seemed almost awkward at times, and even the ever-cool Sanji seemed to slip up once in a while. For others, they tended to be quiet, almost unusually so. Despite the alcohol, Zoro seemed far more stoic than usual. Robin had an air of aloofness to her that Mika had often taken advantage of to scare her every now and then. The girl seemed to like being able to greatly. Everyone else behaved as normally as possible, only breaking in small and quick instances that the kids never saw. Only time seemed to wear out this cheerfulness though, and the issue on their minds would soon need to be addressed. "Hey, Mika, yeah daddy? You wanna go on your own adventure?"
As Brooke and Frankie played their music, whilst Usopp and Chopper had gotten Akio to do their sil chopstick dance, it was hard for Luffy to hear Mika's response. So, he looked away from the cheerful scene and looked down towards his daughter. He could see his little girl's eyes as wide as an owl's own eyes with a unique sparkle to them that indicated her sheer amazement for the suggestion. Her mouth was agape just slightly, too speechless to respond immediately.
So, Luffy thought he would continue on to say, "Well, Akio would go with you too, and we're having a good friend come." Ee. A high-pitched squeal came from Mika as she released her excitement. The shrill scream put an immediate stop to everyone else's activity. It even lasted for a good few seconds before she finally began speaking coherently. Really? Luffy grinned. Yep, all by myself. Kinda. Akio's going with you too. Akio blinked with surprise. I am? The rest of the Straw Hats immediately replied, yes. And you're going to travel with a friend of ours, Vivi. Mika immediately gasped. Vivi? Like, the princess you helped out in your stories, Princess Vivi? Yeah, that's so cool. Mika cheered out overly excited. Are you going to the Sandy Kingdom? Not exactly. Nami answered this time as she walked up next to Luffy. We actually are sending you to the East Blue, where me, Daddy, and your uncles come from. Whoa, Mika gasped with amazement. I can see all your hometowns and stuff. Yeah, Luffy answered cheerfully. Mika's happy and excited emotions bubbled within her body like soda. She couldn't help but giggle excitedly over the prospect of seeing places and people she had only heard stories about. To see the kingdom her family saved from a crocodile. To see the floating restaurant. To see her aunt in Cocoa Village. And see the village with windmills where her father and uncles grew up. It was all just so exhilarating for her. The East Blue, huh? Akio said, pondering. He had heard the stories too, but mostly paid attention to how peaceful it was to live in. It sounded to him like a nice vacation. Hearing this, and seeing Mika so excited, it made the whole crew smile untroubled. For they knew that the kids had not big intentions. To send the kids somewhere safe. The prospect of an adventure had been a lie of sorts, but there was a truth to it that was very much real. As long as their precious Mika believed that, it didn't matter in the end. However, Mika's cheerful attitude was suddenly replaced with a realization. She then looked to her father, then everyone else. She asked out, but why isn't everyone coming too? Instantly, Luffy and Nami frowned. Had it been too good to be true? Well, Nami started saying, sounding cautious and unsure.
We still have our own adventure to finish. Luffy stated, quickly putting on a confident smile. He then squatted down to Mika's eye level and continued on to say, if we stop our journey now, then people will think we're a bunch of wussies.
But you would beat those guys up, Mika stated surely. Sanji released a curt chuckle. Of course, but then everyone would think we were liars too. Usopp added, as head liar of the crew. We can't beat up rumors. Oh, Mika said, sounding to have understood. Only to continue with, but what if you punch them really hard in their dumb faces? Namika, instantly, Mika's attention drew unto her father. Her father's staid attitude had surprised her along with the use of her full name. Something he would rarely use. As such, she was even more attentive to his words.
Luffy didn't remain so serious for long. He soon lightened his serious expression with a soft smile. He then told her, we can't just give up our adventure either, ya know. One Piece is still waiting, and I going to be king of the pirates.
Mika began brimming with pride as she heard her father say that. So she grinned and nodded happily. I get it. Grinning now himself, Luffy then patted his daughter's head. That's my little girl. He stopped soon after. Smiling fondly, Nami stepped over to her daughter just as Luffy finished. She then immediately hugged her daughter, showing her love for her as well as hiding the sadness. Still, she spoke to her warmly. We always love you. You know that, right? Mama, Mika said, sounding embarrassed, even blushing a little. Mika, I know. Mika said immediately with a smile. I love you, Daddy, and everyone too. What the girl had said had instantly hit everyone at their hearts. Most couldn't help but smile proudly at the girl. Some like Robin even shed a small tear. Except Frankie who, after being heavily influenced by the emotions of others, began to burst into manly tears all while trying to reject the idea that he was crying. Zoro didn't shed a single tear, but he nonetheless smiled. Sanji was much the same. Only one left was Akio, who was completely unmoved by the scene. In fact, he was a little embarrassed just to be watching this emotional moment. He was just a boy after all. Still, in this moment, they were a family, one last time. Mika spoke softly, but I'll be able to see everyone again soon, right? Yeah, hopefully because afterwards, everything changes.